Let's get right to the news about the Mets, Ken. They pick up Gregory Soto for their bullpen. What else do you know about not just this, but what else the Mets could be doing after this?
They want more as far as the bullpen is concerned. And Will Salmon of The Athletic noted a few weeks ago, I believe it was, that teams look at their young pitching, their prospect pitching, pretty favorably. And they have guys that they can move. They've really rebuilt their system well. So they're in good position to do not just a deal like this with Soto, but other deals for other relievers if that's what they want to do.
Is the value out there for the Mets to say we want more of, we talked about it earlier, more of a Dennis Santana type than say they're going to get outbid for a Emmanuel Clase, a Bednar, because they already have a closer?
It's a good question. And always, Eric, you know this too. With closers and late inning guys, the psychology of going from the ninth inning to the eighth inning, as certain pitchers would, that you mentioned, that's always an issue. So maybe a Santana for them makes more sense. At the same time, I believe Edward Diaz has an opt-out after this year. So a closer with control beyond this year would also be useful. But you have to worry about how he's going to react in not pitching the ninth, especially if he's a guy who is not signed. Now, Clase is signed cheaply, so it wouldn't be as much of an issue with him. It would be more the pride factor. But I don't know that Clase is even getting moved.
What about the other needs for them? We heard third base, we heard center field for the Mets. Which is more of a priority? Because they have Vientos, because they have Tyrone Taylor, they have options. Is there a priority there for the Mets?
It would seem to me center field is more the priority. And third base, as you mentioned, it's Vientos, Beatty, Mauricio. Now, those guys are available too, and possibly the Mets trade one of them to do something else. But in my view, that position they can continue patching together. Is it ideal? No. But it's somewhere where you want to give some guys a little bit of time. Now, you can argue, if you're a Mets fan, you probably would argue, those guys have all gotten their chances. Let's move on. But center field, to me, that's something that they've been focused on. And a guy like Harrison Bader, who they had before, would make sense. Luis Robert Jr. is someone that they've talked about. So I can see them going any number of ways on both. They could do a third baseman. I just don't see it as important as perhaps the outfielder.
And lastly, on this trade, let's hit the Orioles side of the equation. Ken, zero surprise here. They're going to unload any player that's in this type of position, right? A free agent after this year, and maybe even if there's a year and a half of control, depending on the player.
No question. And Scott, it's interesting that we're a week out here, or almost a week out, and this has started for them. And it had to start. You have so many guys on expiring contracts, from Eflin and Shigano to now Dominguez and Ryan O'Hearn and Cedric Mullins Jr. All of these guys, plus more, that you can't just wait until the last day and then pull the trigger all of a sudden. No, you've got to go somewhat in sequence. I can't say that they have it all planned out. We're going to trade Mullins on Tuesday, O'Hearn on Wednesday. No, but you have to get the ball rolling, and they did with this trade.
All right, you wrote a great article about the Padres. I just read it this morning about the urgency of AJ Preller. He's always urgent. And you even said that in your article. Can you give us a synopsis of how AJ Preller will attack the trade deadline differently, or could attack it differently than other GMs do that are in different situations than he's in?
Well, the premise of it, Eric, as you mentioned, is that he's always in an urgent position. So when I've heard from other executives in the last couple of weeks, well, they've got to do something this year because they're going to lose King and they're going to lose Cease and they lose Suarez to free agency. All of that is possible for sure. But when has AJ Preller not operated like that? And I know his contract's up next year, and you can make the case, well, he might be trying to get a new contract. But again, he always operates the same way. So he is going to try to do some things. Now, he's identified what he wants, one or two bats. They also could look for bullpen help because their guys have thrown an awful lot, as good as they are. And if they trade Cease, which is possible, then they would need some kind of backfill in the rotation at the very least. So if you ask me what AJ Preller is going to do, I have no earthly idea. If you ask me, is he going to be busy? Yes, I would expect he'd be busy, perhaps buying and selling, perhaps just buying. I don't know. But This is a guy who, unlike some of his peers, not all, but some, is not worried about so much what the models look like and what the surplus value is going to be. He routinely goes for it. Now, it doesn't always work. We know that. And it hasn't always worked with the free agents. Yes, of course. When you fire as constantly as he fires, you're going to miss sometimes. That's just the nature of baseball. It's the nature of every aspect of this game, from players to front office people to media. No one is always right. But what I appreciate about him and what I believe fans should appreciate is at least this guy takes a shot. He doesn't sit there and worry and talk himself out of things. He talks himself into things.
As a Padres fan, do they have to look at it like a ledger sheet? Say, okay, we get rid of Cease, that's $7 million. On this side of the ledger, he could spend this. Or because, like you said, we don't know about the financial situation. There was a lot of drama early with the family. Is it, if you're a Padres fan, can you look at it that way and say, man, if we could just drop this guy's contract, we could pick up this? Or is it not going to be a dollar for dollar ledger? Or could it go up higher?
We don't know the answer to that. And clearly they have had some different financial restrictions in recent years since the passing of Peter Seidler that they didn't before. And they're in a funny spot with the luxury tax. They're way over the first threshold. They're a little bit over the second threshold. Now, do they want to get under the second threshold? I don't know that that matters so much to them. But money isn't always, it's always a concern with every team. So I would imagine there's some of that coming into play here. For instance, they can't simply add $20 million of payroll, probably. But I don't know if it's exactly as you said, Eric, where if you're taking here, you've got to subtract there. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. They might
Ken,
not
let's
either,
hit.
for that matter. They might be in a situation where they compile what they're going to do or what they want to do and then take it to ownership, and ownership says yay or nay.
Right. Hey, let's always remember at this time of year, the GMs are working their butts off, but then everything has to get approved. They have a boss. They are the agent for the boss, which is the owner, and money is getting moved mid-season. They don't plan that way. So anyway, let's work on a team that has been difficult with budgeting the last few years for Jerry Dipoto. And that's the other big deal to hit. Josh Naylor is acquired. To me, he seems like a Dipoto dream. He makes contact. He's a gamer. He's got some pop. What did you think of this move for the Mariners and potentially what's next for them?
I liked it for the Mariners. And right away after the trade was made, you saw there be people basically reporting that they're not done, and they're also in the mix for Eugenio Suarez. If they got both those guys, that theoretically should fix their offense, even though, of course, Seattle's a more difficult place to hit than Arizona. I get it, all that. But Suarez would be a coup, no doubt, especially with the Yankees and Cubs and other teams interested. But I did like this move, and Dipoto too, because he has multiple things to do. He also might want bullpen help. Can't wait till the last day and do everything. So he got a jump start of the market, just as he did last year with the Rosarena. And I am quite sure they have a lot of balls in play, a lot of balls in the air, and they're not done. They can't be done.
Let's stick with the Diamondbacks here. They got rid of Naylor. Obviously, Eugenio Suarez is going to be maybe a bidding war, we assume, because everybody seems to need a third baseman that has 35 dingers, 35 plus. But is there a case where the Diamondbacks offload more players than any other team because of all their expiring contracts?
Yes. And when I reported yesterday that they were going to sell, what I was told was, we don't know how far we're going to go. So could they unload 5 or 6 guys? Yes, they could. I do not expect them to trade Gallen and Kelly. I expect them to trade Gallen or Kelly. Now, beyond that, and beyond Suarez, you're talking about Randall Grichuk. You're talking about Shelby Miller, possibly if he gets back healthy. They can do still a number of things. I don't know that they'll go beyond the expiring contracts because they're going to want to compete next year. But they're in a situation right now. They know that this season, mostly because of injuries, is all but lost. Could they be a team that's quite active? Yes. I expect the Orioles to make the most trades. Pittsburgh, we're not sure about yet, but Arizona is going to make multiple deals as well.
But why not both? Why not both Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen?
Eric, mostly because you've got to get through the season. And they're not going to have enough pitching to get through the season if they trade both. Now, Could they do it? Might they get pushed enough to where they would do it and then you figure out the rest of the season? Yes. But it's also not a group there, and this goes for the owner, Ken Kendrick, the general manager, Mike Hazen, and everyone in that front office that likes to lose 100 games. They've done that. Now, they're not going to lose 100 this year, obviously, but you know what I'm saying. They don't want to just struggle through the last 2 months. And with Kelly, he might be in more demand right now, even though he's older than Gallen. I'm not sure how that dynamic's playing out. Kelly, in my view, they would have a chance to re-sign. They'd give him a qualifying offer, most likely. And then he's been a guy, granted, that has accepted 2 below-market deals to sign with Arizona, to stay with Arizona. But he's comfortable there, and with the right deal, perhaps he would stay. He's going to be 37 next season, if I'm not mistaken. So that might be another reason, too. You know this, Eric. Once you trade a player, it becomes that much harder to get him back.
It's still surprising to me, Ken, if they get an offer that makes sense and that's better than what they would get for a comp pick, right? And it's $50 million or more, I think they'd get after the first round. If it's less, they would get it after the second round, which starts to not matter as much. Do you really think that if they get solid offers for both of them, Kelly's got a great track history in the playoffs a couple of years ago, and I think some teams probably figure they can fix Gallen, that they would deal both and maybe try and get someone else to fill the innings down the stretch, whether it's a veteran or one of the young guys that they pick up and they try out?
Certainly could do that. And I can't recall the exact circumstance, Scott, but they've done this before. I believe they traded someone, maybe it was Greinke. I think it was Greinke. The year they traded him, they backfilled with Mike Leake. So, yes, of course they could do that. But my understanding is that is not their initial intention. Now, as you guys know, we're in the final days here. Teams are going to push for starting pitching. So if they get pushed on both and if they cross the threshold that they have set for both, of course, they will do the trades and worry about the rest later. But it seems that their inclination is not to do that.
Okay, I've got one more, maybe EK, one more at the finish line here. Mine is a general question. Have we learned anything about teams on the fences, on the fence in the past 24 to 48 hours? The Angels, perhaps. It sounds like the Cardinals will be selling. Have you learned anything about teams like that?
The Diamondbacks were the first domino, and certainly we learned yesterday and saw yesterday that they were going to sell. The Cardinals are certainly leaning in that direction and are expected to sell as well. Kansas City on the fence, Tampa Bay on the fence, a lot of teams still on the fence. I would expect Minnesota, they're going to sell their expiring contract guys at the very least. But this weekend will be a big weekend for a number of teams. And after this weekend, we will seemingly have some more clarity on just who's in and out. Kansas City is a fascinating one to me. They don't want to sell. They want to compete. They want to contend. They feel like they've built a good team. And all this talk of Lugo is fine, but they're not as into it, from what I understand, as the rest of the world is. So that's one team to watch for sure.
Ken, I have a benefit of not needing to troll you on Twitter. I can ask your questions right here. You said about the Blue Jays earlier needing a starting pitcher because of Max Scherzer getting older, and I think you had mentioned Bassett's contract is up. Is there really more of a need for starting pitching with the Jays than that relief pitching role, or maybe some slug, even if Santander comes back?
Varsho's coming back first. We don't know about Santander. They certainly need bullpen help because of the injuries that they've incurred in the bullpen in recent weeks, really all season. A starter, I don't know that it's a necessity, but you're talking about relying on Max Scherzer, who, let's face it, has been on the injured list quite a bit in recent years. Talking about relying on Eric Lauer, who has been tremendous for them, but you don't know for sure if he's going to be able to sustain it the whole season. So you're not only getting a person in place for next year if you get that controllable starter, but you're also reinforcing what you have for this year. And I want to address some complaints from Blue Jays fans yesterday because of Fair Territory focusing on the Yankees' poor performance Wednesday night instead of praising the Jays. We've been praising the Jays. The Jays are doing great. We all love what the Jays are doing. The focus after 4 errors in 3 innings the other night, 12 errors in 10 games against the Blue Jays, that was going to be the Yankees. That's how the world works, folks.